Okay, guys, I got recommended this video from Colinello about Blue Rose. So let's watch it and see what this is about. I don't think I've ever actually heard of this player before.
The first year of RuneScape's history, there was one player who controlled all of the best gear and weapons in the game.
Oh, yeah?
Blue Rose 13X.
Oh, yeah, 'cause you had
she
to
was
mine
RuneScape's
for
first
these,
celebrity, and her name was constantly surrounded in controversy. This is the never-before-told story of the rise and fall of her.
I'm currently attempting to piece together an entire timeline of not only RuneScape's history and development, but also RuneScape's history of the game and the culture around it and all of those things. I am constantly upset by the fact that I do not have enough information about the line of players that were celebrities up until Zezima and then past Zezima and into Wooks and into Settled now. I want to be able to draw that line all the way back in my brain, and I feel like I won't be able to rest until I can do that.
Cartel. Blue Rose started playing RuneScape almost immediately after the game launched in January of 2001. Nobody knows an exact date, but funnily enough, we do know that she was exactly the 1,242nd player to make an account. Pretty much immediately, she took an interest in the mining and smithing skills that few players were training at the time due to how tedious they were. While mining, she met another player named Demonic. Demonic was a founding member of a mining and smithing clan called Steel Corporation Inc. This clan had also founded one of
I think a lot of times about this concept with RuneScape and about video games. This video is really long. I gotta stop talking so much else. We're never gonna get through it. But I think I wonder if, because I never played Ultima and I never played any of the MUDs back in the day or any of those kinds of games, and I really wonder where the culture of skilling came from and how it actually became a thing. I often think if it's just a thing that's innate in certain people, that what they really want to do in a video game is skill and work on getting these crafting abilities up, if there's just something innate in a person that says that versus doing combat or what. Because, you know, typically, when was like the first farming video game that came out? When was the first video game that had a giant world that you could just absolutely skill in over long periods of time? It had to be obviously earlier than 2001, but I wonder if that game was very popular or if MMOs started to awaken something inside of somebody, inside of a whole group of people where they were like, oh, it turns out that fishing in a virtual world is the thing that I will do anything to experience more
the
of.
game's first ever and soon to be most popular fan sites, tip.it. Demonic was impressed by Blue's account, asked her to join, and she agreed. This was a really good choice because it wasn't long until Blue would become the best smith in the game. By March, she was level 60 smithing, which would place her at rank 1 on the high scores. This was a really, really big deal for reasons we'll get into in a little bit. But first, how did she get to rank 1 so quickly?
Just rank 1 in a video game.
The early levels were likely done by herself, just mining the ores she needed, smelting them at a furnace, and smithing them at an anvil. Later, she was partially funded by Steel Corp. Demonic would mine ores and run them over to her at a furnace for free, so she didn't have to spend any time mining. But why would he do that? Demonic was just a few smithing levels behind Blue, so why not keep the ores to himself and raise his own level? Well, Blue's rank of Demonic's babe on the tip.it forums might explain things.
Don't date people in video games. I can't believe it's 2024 and I'm having to explain this, but I mean, you know, this was obviously happening back then, but I met plenty of people over the years who are finding their waifus through the video games. Don't do this, man. Don't do it. Listen, you have enough going on in your life. There's enough issues already with significant othership in this world. Do not tie yourself to somebody. Don't sugar mom. Don't sugar daddy somebody in a video game. Bro, stop following women around in video games. Stop doing this, man. Like, live your life. It's just come on, man. Just come on, you know? Like, it's a bad look. It's a bad look. Demonic's babe, dude. That's so funny. Do you remember back in the day when we used to use terms like babe and boo and all those things? Nowadays, we don't even say girlfriend anymore, dude. We're just like, yeah, I live with this person and I have for a long time, but like, you know, it's just like casual. We have a kid together and we're married and all that, but it's like casual. It's casual marriage.
Pretty soon after they met, they started dating. They even met in person once, but didn't know what to talk about, so they just quietly played RuneScape together instead.
dude. Gen Alpha problems.
Blue's smithing level, 60. Her and Demonic's chemistry level, solid 12.
Yeah.
When Demonic was busy, Blue Rose also had another unnamed.
It's about the teamwork, dude. You know, that's what a relationship is at the end of the day. It's a team, baby. You know? I do this, you do that. We support each other. We get through this life together because things are hard. I get the ore, you put it in the furnace, baby. We make things work together.
Player
dude.
who would mine for her, although this player would quit the game soon after.
Aww.
It's also likely she used the profit she made from selling her smith goods and bought some of the ore she needed from random players. Regardless of how she got the ore, she would soon become the most important person in RuneScape because of her high level. Smithing was the key to
back in the day. Couldn't you only certificate certain items though? Like coal and something else maybe? Lobsters maybe?
Success and wealth in the game at the time. But why? Well, the biggest reason smithing was so important is that unlike today, most of the gear in the game couldn't be purchased in shops or dropped by monsters. You had to make it yourself or buy it from other players who could. The game also revolved around player versus player combat. When you signed up for a RuneScape account, you had the option of being a PKer or a non-PKer. PKers would have player versus player combat enabled everywhere at all times except for Lumbridge. Non-PKers were safe everywhere, but were missing out on the most exciting content the game had to offer at the time. You could switch between being a PKer and non-PKer twice, and then your final choice would become permanent. At the time, banks could also only hold coins, so death was a really big setback. If you died, you'd lose every item you owned aside from your 3.
Everybody was basically an ultimate Iron Man back then. If you think about it, honestly, RuneScape Classic was a lot more like Albion Online in that way, that you sort of carried everything around with you, and then when you died, you dropped all of it, and then you used your money to buy gear back so that you could get back out there and do it. You were building up a cash stack specifically to have that. What is this? I don't recognize this item. Is that a spinach roll? There weren't spinach rolls back then. What is this? What is this frog? I have to get my hands on a RuneScape Classic server so that I can play it locally and figure out what was going on in that game, because I have such foggy memories of RuneScape Classic as a kid. I came in sometime maybe around 2002, and RuneScape 3 released, or sorry, not RuneScape 3, RuneScape 2 released sometime shortly thereafter, and I played a lot of RuneScape Classic, but it's like, dude, it was hard to find my way around in it, and it was just this sea of green and gray roads that I remember, and occasionally blue that you would walk up on, and you'd have to sleep in a sleeping bag when you got too tired, and it's such a hard memory for me to really piece together in my brain. I want to go back and
most valuable. PKers with the strongest gear would have a huge advantage over others and have the best chance at defending their items.
Heck yeah, dude.
Imagine not being able to use a bank these days with how many important items exist now.
Oh yeah.
Who would want to play like that?
It was different back then.
Sounds terrible. The only way to
get Ultimate Iron Man, dude. Ultimate Iron Man rock. It's one of my favorite ways to play the game, honestly.
Best gear was to get it from Blue. She had become the go-to smither for just about everyone in RuneScape. Players would bring her the materials needed to make the item they wanted, and she would smith it for them for free. It was a win for both sides, as players would get the items they wanted and she would get free XP. Blue's smithing service became so popular that she became the game's first celebrity. Anyone who played the game for a considerable amount of time knew her name. She was sort of like Zezima before Zezima started playing. She became so well known that players on the tip.it forums would even begin to write fan fiction about her, although she very understandably didn't like that.
Baby, no. Baby, no. Let me read this real quick.
Well, if you countless hours saved about her, although she
Could we get a lock on this, please? Excuse the sense of humor failure, but I've been promised in the past stuff like this will get locked as I get more than my fair share of unwelcome, unwanted attention. Dude. People do odd things because they don't feel like the people they're talking to on the internet are real people, and they are. It is peculiar. You think you have a level of anonymity that you don't actually have. People will start to recognize who you are, but like, don't write fan fiction about real people. Okay? I know that in my past, I wrote Kingdom Hearts fan fiction. I'm aware of that. Those are characters, and also I made my own OCs, so I wasn't really infringing on anything. You can't sue me. Those are my original characters you can't steal. But Don't write it about real people.
Very understandably didn't like that. While Blue's services saved players countless hours of smithing, there's actually a service that can save you countless hours in the kitchen. Today's sponsor, Factor, and they're ready-to-eat meals.
No way.
Factor takes the stress out of meal planning.
I wish Factor would sponsor me so that I can get
and
free
just
Factor.
that feeling of, I don't want to cook tonight. There's over 35 meals to choose from each week, including options like keto, calorie smart, vegan and veggie, and more. They're ready to heat and eat in just 2 minutes, meaning you save more time. Factor now offers loads of snack options too, like breakfast, smoothies, juices, and small bites. When life gets hectic, Factor...
Dude, all those frozen meals in the grocery store are absolutely terrible for you. And I'll still succumb to them sometimes and buy some macaroni and cheese thing just so I don't have to cook that night. But this is incredible. Dude, look at this big old honking chicken breast. This is like 35 grams of protein right here. And you have vegetables and you have some kind of mash, maybe a cauliflower mash or a potato mash underneath of it with what appears to be guacamole, pea soup. I don't know. But this is such a good deal. It's decently expensive, dude, but Factor rocks. If you're somebody who's looking for a reason to be able to actually feed yourself good food and you have disposable income, this is
also flexible. Change your order up with plans from 4 to 18 meals every week, or reschedule or pause your deliveries at any time. Get 50% off your first Factor box and 20% off your first month of orders using my link. Click the link in the description or scan the QR code with your phone. Malicious players would also begin signing up with usernames that looked like hers, stand near her in-game, and try to steal resources from players who weren't paying close enough attention when trying to use Blue's services. The game's only volunteer moderator at the time, Rab, says that half of his job was handling Blue Rose impersonators. Before he was given the power to ban players, he would teleport them to the moderator room on top of Al-Kharid's palace. An area that he could interrogate them in and they couldn't teleport out of. A big reason that Rab would step down from being a moderator later in 2001 was because of how much of a hassle it was banning all of these
That person's typing skills are bad.
impersonators himself. The game had more fake roses than a dollar store the day before Mother's Day. In May of 2001, Jagex would do a big and much needed rework to the smithing skill. So you know how today you need 99 smithing to make a rune plate body, and people think that's a little steep of a requirement? Well, prior to this rework, you needed 99 smithing to make a steel plate body. The levels needed to make things were just all over the place. You only needed 55 smithing to make a mithril dagger, but a steel kite shield needed 84. It was really weird. So on May 8th, Jagex would rework everything's level requirements to the same ones we have today. This would inadvertently be doing Blue Rose a big favor. Tons of items.
This is probably the most common thing that I see in the game currently today with complaints that is universal, and most people feel the same way about it. Smithing is basically useless in RuneScape at this point. There's somewhat of a moneymaker that can be done there, and especially, you know, it's a great way to turn just your raw time into gold by high alching without having to trade with anybody. Rune plate bodies are a great way to do that. But in general, smithing is such a it just doesn't do anything for you long term. The amount of time that it would take you to get 99 smithing versus the amount of time that it would take you to get the money to just go and buy a rune plate body from what's his face, whatever, the guy outside of Edgeville or whatever. Like, it's crazy, dude. It's crazy.
Had their smithing level requirements lowered, so she would unlock the ability to make gear that she previously couldn't. As Blue smithed more and more powerful items and the game's player base grew, her popularity would grow with it. She would gain a lot of fans who would mine ore for her for free every so often to help her increase her smithing level. Although some weren't doing it just out of kindness, as you'll see in a moment. When she unlocked the ability to smith adamant square shields, she was absolutely hounded by players who wanted one as soon as possible. She was receiving constant messages about them and struggled to keep up with the demand. She posted on the tip.it forums that for a while, playing was hellish due to the sheer volume of people. Some of her fans who had given her free items in the past would also now try to call in favors to skip the line and get new items first. Here's a rant Blue posted to the forums about a player who had helped her out.
I'm upset and actually rather furious following a nasty falling out with a player I thought I was on friendly though casual terms with. He claims I promised him the first Addy hatchet and has now turned on me as I have declined to smith him one. He throws at me all the stuff he did for me. Well, I'm sorry to say, but Demonic was the only person ever getting the first hatchet, but that's not the point. A lot of people in this game have been kind to me, let me smith lots of their bars, giving me free coal or whatever. Am I to suppose now that they have that they have me over a barrel and can guilt trip me into making them something whenever they demand. Yeah, dude, that's what they think. That's what people on the internet believe, right? Is that there is no kindness that doesn't come back around eventually. You have to be very careful with this kind of thing, for sure.
In the past, this player got mad when Blue wouldn't promise him what would soon be the game's first ever adamant hatchet. She didn't name who the player was specifically, but this player would out themselves by commenting, "That's being a bit bitchy, ain't it?" This player, who went by the name Sausage Dog, would make a new thread the next day called Apologies. I can't spell. Videos about 2001 RuneScape are quickly becoming my favorite to make because half of the forum posts I read while researching are just kids yelling at each other over pixels with forum signatures like...
Dude, I like low-key kind of miss the, not like the drama specifically, but just the way that people back in the day really took things so much more seriously. I don't have that in me anymore. I don't have the ability to get angry at other human beings over a video game. If something happens and you and I have beef or a problem, or you feel this kind of way about me, you're gone. We're done. I don't have the capacity to care about it anymore. It's a video game, my guy. We're playing games out here and we're having a good time. And if it becomes anything past that, if it becomes this like weird bickering lifestyle thing, then like we're just done with it. And this is such a case of that. And it was so common when I was a kid. I would have all of these squabbles with random people who I didn't even really know, and what a waste of time it ended up being, you know?
Bin Laden will meet his maker soon, and George Bush quotes. In late June of 2001, Blue would reach 81 smithing. If she drank a dwarven stout, which would temporarily raise her smithing level by 1, she could now make adamant kite shields. Ooh. But when players began asking her to make them, she told them all no. For the first time ever, she would be smithing this item for Demonic and her friends only. But why? Well, she probably didn't want to repeat the hellish mess of making adamant square shields for free. But it's actually
this is another thing that people don't get about these kinds of things, right? Is that like if somebody else is ruining something, it will become ruined for everybody. Did you guys ever have a kid in your class who just like constantly caused problems, and because of that your teacher became unbelievably strict and super not fun to be there? Or have you ever worked a job where you guys have good privileges and then someone starts taking advantage of them, and then they're like, oh, who cares, like, you know, they let us take this stuff home for free, and they like take advantage of it, and then they have to cut it off for everybody and everyone gets punished for that? That's how this works, because you can't just punish a single person. Like if people see that there is the ability to take advantage of something and they start taking advantage of it, then other people around them will go, okay, so he did it wrong, but maybe I can take advantage of it in the right way. It is a communal social contract that we all enter into with things like this.
A bit more complicated than that. Prior to Blue reaching the level for adamant kite shields, someone had discovered a duplication glitch that allowed them to flood the market with adamant square shields and other items that only Blue could make. This really annoyed her, so she vowed to only give these new shields to her friends that she knew she could trust. That way, if another duplication glitch occurred, they wouldn't flood the market. She even kept track of the exact count of adamant kite shields and who she gave them to. If you ask me, this was just an excuse, and she really just didn't want to have to spend weeks making shields for thousands of screaming middle schoolers. This was the true start of her monopoly.
Not fun, why are you doing
what was then the best shield in the game could be made by her and her alone. And only the most privileged and connected players in the game could get one. Pressing the like button on this video, however, is free for anyone.
He says press the like button,
exclusivity
and then
only made people want these shields
like
even more. She'd get tons of messages from players offering her just about anything to get one. So the same day that she said she would only be selling these new shields to her friends, she would make another post auctioning off just one. The initial bid was for 700 of any type of rune, as long as they weren't the basic elemental ones that could be bought from shops. This might not sound like much, but this is an extremely high ask.
Dude, even back in early RuneScape 2 days, law runes were ridiculously expensive. It was such a rare drop back in the day, and you had to spend so much time grinding it, and so few people were committed to actually doing that.
Obtaining non-elemental runes in Classic was incredibly tough. I actually have an entire video devoted to Classic's rune shortage. If you want to watch that one, I will link it again at the end of the video. The bidding on Blue's auction thread got up to 1,500 runes before the backup copy of the thread I have ends, but it likely sold for much higher. The reason I think so is because a little over 2 weeks later, another another shield would get auctioned off, where bids climbed to 900,000 GP before, again, the backup cuts off. This might not sound that crazy, but you have to remember that 1, this is an adamant kite shield, an item that sells for about 6,000 gold today, and 2, 900,000 gold was much, much, much harder to obtain back then.
Think about the economy in general, right? The adamant kite shield was the rarest shield in the game, so there would be almost nothing that you couldn't buy with 900,000 GP as far as actually getting it from other players. That would give you so much room to wiggle around with because she was the only person who was able to make it. It's such a supply and demand at work that it's absolutely unbelievable. It wasn't even that good of an item, but compared to everything else, it was extremely good, and that little bit of edge in a game that was mainly focused on PvP content would just do you wonders. You would basically guarantee that if somebody had the exact same stats and the exact same gear as you, except for that adamant kite shield, you would win.
Than today. The adamant kite wasn't even that much better than the widely available adamant square shield, but people were willing to pay anything to be someone who had the best shield in the game. Think of it like people who own the Third Age pickaxe today. It's the same exact thing as a dragon pickaxe, but sells for 12 billion GP. Except there's a small piece of information I've left out until now. The icon of the adamant kite shield that I've been showing is actually just what it looked like in your inventory. When you actually equipped the shield, it looked exactly the same as an adamant.
My dad has an adamant kite shield, dude. Yeah. I can show you. Here's a picture of him, actually. He works for Jagex, so, you know. That's how that happens. He tests all the stuff before it comes out. He actually has a rune kite shield, too, but, you know. I don't have a picture of that one because he's not allowed to show it. He signed an NDA, so you know.
Square shield. The real adamant kite shield was the friends you made along the way, because only they could confirm to others that you actually owned one. Now knowing how much money she could make, Blue's attitude when it came to adamant kite shields and every new item she could smith going forward would change. She would smith you anything you wanted if you could make her an offer she was interested in. The two main things that she wanted were ores and runes, and lots of them. Her prices weren't cheap, but if you wanted the best of the best, you had no other choice.
Arguably, back in Classic, all the things that we really like about RuneScape were distilled into perfection, but it was just so... Its simplicity made it less approachable by people, which is usually what you would think of as being the opposite, but it's true, because there's not as many ways to get to the place. There's only one path to get to the place. It creates all these problems where if you don't enjoy doing those things, or if you don't have the means to do those things, then all of a sudden you're blocked out of actually doing it, so it just puts off a lot of people. But this sort of, we know all the items in the game, the tiers are very obvious to see, the economy is controlled by the players, the gameplay is really simple but very addicting. All those things were arguably at their most core back in Classic. And in RuneScape 2, they're just easier to do and more enjoyable to get there because, like I said, there's so much variety in the ways that you can actually get there. You know, there's so many gear subs for your tiers. You know, you have so many ways to, you know, a Berserker helm versus the Nezi helm versus, you know, a granite body versus a fighter torso. There's just so many different ways of doing these things now. But back then, the things that we like about RuneScape, like I said, I think it's just a straight line.
Now, keep in mind that banks could still only hold coins. So how could you trade, let's say, 500 coal to her when you could only hold 30
when it was brought back
items at a time? Some of you Classic players might be thinking, why not use certificates? By speaking to NPCs known as certers, you could turn raw resources into certificates. Certificates were basically a primitive form of banknotes. If you gave 5 pieces of coal to Giles in Draenor, he would give you 1 coal certificate. You could then trade the certificate to another player, they could turn it back into Giles, and get 5 pieces of coal. These certificates would also stack. You could technically be holding 500 pieces of coal by having 100 coal certificates, and it would only take up 1 inventory slot. Problem solved. Except
100%.
Certificates didn't exist until December of 2001.
Oh, okay.
So the only way to trade 500 pieces of coal would be to trade some to Blue, mine some more, trade that over, mine some more, and so on. This just wouldn't work. It was too time consuming. So Blue had to get creative. She wanted all of the items traded over to her in the form of mules. Mules were accounts made with the sole purpose of holding items. If you wanted to trade 500 coal though, you'd sign up for 17 Runescape accounts. You'd mine the coal on your main account and trade it all over to each mule account until the inventories were all full of coal. Then you would send the login details of each account to Blue. She'd log in and trade the coal to her main account as she needed it, and she would give you whatever item you purchased.
All for pixels, dude. We do it all for pixels. The amount of effort that we'll put into getting pixels is insane. What is it? Why is it so much fun to click on a screen?
It may sound absolutely nuts and overcomplicated, but it was legitimately the best way of trading bulk amounts of items at the time. Also, luckily, membership didn't exist yet, so you weren't spending your whole allowance on this process. Around this time, Blue would also sign up for her own
This is the kind of stuff that my
accounts.
friend Shane was up
She
to
would have
whenever we were
one
kids. He was
or
like
a
5
few
years older
accounts
than me.
mining resources,
He's
and
the one
then
who got
have
me
her
into
mules run them over to wherever her main account was smithing. Playing like this was actually a common practice at the time, even if it sounds incredibly cheaty, and quite a few of the game's top players would do it. The game's creator, Andrew Gower, didn't like it, but nobody was actually banned for it.
Yeah.
In late July of 2001, Blue would reach
so
level 83 smithing, meaning with a boost, she could now make the adamant two-handed sword. This item had existed since the launch of the game back in January, but there was no way to obtain one until now. This was also the best weapon in the game, so players would be absolutely scrambling to try and get their hands on one. High-level players would be willing to pay anything to get one, and as usual, Blue's friends and supporters would get theirs for free. But then something unexpected happened. Approximately a day or two after Blue accomplished this, Jagex would release Rune Knight items into the game for the first time ever. The Rune Longsword, Rune Shortsword, Rune Mace, Rune Chainbody, Rune Skirt, and Rune Plate Legs could now be purchased from the Champions Guild Rune Shop, and you could get the Rune Medium Helm as a drop from Lesser Demons. Not only was the Rune Longsword better than the Adamant Two-Hander,
that's genuinely kind of dirty, honestly, to run the game like that for that long and then to put items. But maybe they were watching all this happen and they thought, we have to do something about this because this is creating problems in the community that we can't get around. So just putting Rune in the... But I mean, there were only so many people who could use Rune, so... I don't know. It's definitely a difficult thing.
All you needed was 32,000 GP, not hundreds of hours of smithing, or the patience to sign up for dozens of RuneScape accounts. Plus, since it only needed one hand, you could do stuff with your other hand. Like wear a shield with it for extra defense. I can only imagine the disappointment Blue felt when she saw this. This might seem like some cruel joke played by Jagex against Blue, but Rune Knight had been in the works for a while. It had been shown off by Jagex staff in-game to players multiple times, and was even going to be purple at first. Perhaps they changed the color to blue in honor of Blue Rose. I have nothing to actually back that up, I just think it would be cool. Now, even if Blue Rose had the smithing level to make these newly released items, she couldn't.
It wouldn't be worth
Rune Knight
anything.
rocks actually didn't exist yet, so it was impossible to smith any of them. But this day wasn't entirely a loss for Blue and her empire. Jagex had also updated banks to be able to hold items. This would make managing resources and trading much easier. No more need for complicated mules. Except Blue hated it. She felt the bank was too slow and preferred to use mules instead.
Back in the day, you could only talk to one NPC, or an NPC could only talk to one player at a time, and so you had to wait in lines to actually talk to people, and there were so few worlds back then.
Begun smithing in much more remote areas far away from other players to avoid attention, something that she could only accomplish with mules. But I mean, nothing was stopping her from just continuing to use mules instead of the bank, right? Well, Andrew had actually told the player base that when item banks were released, mules would no longer be allowed. I don't think anyone who continued to use mules after this update ever actually got banned, but being such a high-profile player, Blue couldn't take this risk. Blue's empire would take another huge hit in the following weeks.
Dude, these screenshots are
she
so
would announce
good.
On the tip.it forums that she would now be smithing any adamant item that players wanted for free. All they would have to do is bring her the adamant bars, or the ore plus the runes needed to cast superheat item, a spell that turns ores into bars without the need for a furnace.
That's a good
Her
move.
reason for this change is because some community members had grown tired of Blue's monopoly and wanted to do something about it. They had decided to begin funding a few smithers who were close to her level, in exchange for getting getting free adamant gear when they could make it. If Blue didn't begin offering free adamant...
Isn't that such an interesting thing? Rather than doing it yourself, it was so much more efficient to have someone else do it. This is the thing that I'm thinking that they're trying to go with in Brighter Shores, and this is one of the things that I think was really special about RuneScape back in the day. Nowadays, everyone can basically do everything. If you've played the game enough and you understand how the mechanics work, you're really only like a year away at most from getting, 1,700 total level or something like that. So it really negates the need. And honestly, even with Iron Man and stuff, we've proven that this is a way that people are playing the game. It negates the need for the other people who are in the community to be special in any kind of way. Back in this day, and this is a problem with the fact that games exist for so long nowadays, so we're just streamlining them as we go, and eventually these achievements become less and less important. But, it does take away the importance of the other people and even the special feeling and the special role that they play in the community. And I think the Brighter Shores really hopes to sort of make that feeling happen and solve the problem of how does it go away over time by making it so that your friends are the people who you see in the game and not so much the other people, so that you can go into these rooms, say the cooking room, and your friends will be there cooking all the time who really love the cooking setup in that game. And those will be the ones that you give items to. Maybe you have fishing, and because you can only get like 2 professions. I don't know how exactly that's going to work. But maybe you have fishing, and maybe you have mining or whatever. I can't remember what all the skills in Brighter Shores are yet. But you bring them the materials, and then they turn the things into the things that you want for you. Maybe that's how it's going to go. I don't know. I really feel like that this is a special thing that we're missing out on nowadays.
It's possible these Smithers would soon pass her in level, and they had, in her words, a whole army of players mining for them.
Yeah.
Blue could no longer make the best gear in the game, and had lost her main way of making money. Regardless, she continued smithing, as she didn't want to lose her rank
Apple
1
and
spot.
Microsoft,
On
dude.
August 13th, 2001, Jagex would release The Wilderness, a huge stretch of land on the northern part of the map where PKing was enabled everywhere.
Yep.
They would remove the PKer and non-PKer system and make everywhere a safe zone aside from the Wilderness. The Wilderness was a very important update for Blue, because inside it were the first ever Runite rocks.
That's
a large
sick.
variety of new rune weapons and armor that had never been released before
Awesome.
would now be smithable too. At the time, Blue was 84 smithing, so with a Dwarven Stout, she'd be able to boost to 85, the exact level needed to smelt Runite ore into Runite bars. However, she was far from the mining level needed to mine Runite, 85, but she planned ahead for this and had made friends with most of the highest level miners in the game, who, when the Wilderness released, were just days away from hitting 85 mining. Some would give her the ores for free, others would give her some in exchange for a smithed item, and she would also use her now massive bank to buy some. The finished products would sell for way more than the cost of the ore, except for rune full helms, because along with the Wilderness, Jagex also quietly introduced greater demons, which could drop them. She was now making money again thanks to
This is another interesting thing to talk about with RuneScape that I love, is that there's a reason for all of the items dropping from specific things. There's a reason for the existence of monsters in the game. Like Greater Demons dropping rune full helms is such a... They were put into the game for that specific reason, because they had those items on them, because Lesser Demons had the medium helm. And this game grew that way over a really long period of time. And that's what I like so much about RuneScape, is that you can follow back down to the bottom of RuneScape the reason things were created in the game, if you know a little bit about it, just by playing the game, that you can sort of suss out the reasons for it just by going and seeing what monsters drop what and where they were placed at for the first time and all those kinds of things. It's a game that over time has changed, but it still has its roots firmly planted where they were in the very first point.
But as her levels continued to rise, so did the amount of controversy surrounding her monopoly. Blue Rose's reputation was and had been in a really weird spot for a while. I dug through hundreds of...
That's one of the things that I think is odd about RuneScape 3. Sorry to talk about the old topic again, but one of the things I think is weird about RuneScape 3 was when they changed the starting zone, right? That was a really odd choice for me, and that's one of the core things that I think, to me, makes me feel... like RuneScape 3 feels like a different game to me, is that it doesn't start in Lumbridge the way that it used to. Maybe it does now, but I don't think so. I'm pretty sure it started in... Berthorpe? Does it start in Berthorpe now?
forum posts while researching for this video, and on multiple occasions, she was called both the nicest person in this game, while others called her the worst. Everyone had their own reasons for believing which was true, but it mainly seems to boil down to if she would give them the item they wanted.
Of course,
a clan named the Holy Order.
Do I get what I want out of you? Well, then you're a good person if that's yes, and you're a bad person if that's
even
no.
Hated her so much that they would place a 1 million GP bounty on her head. Anyone who killed her in the wilderness and could prove it would receive the prize. Unfortunately, whether they paid up or not has been lost to time. On September 22nd, 2001, Blue would reach 92 smithing, meaning with a boost, she could now make the Rune Square Shield, the new best shield available. Knowing how crazy players went for adamant kite shields, they'd lose their minds for the first Rune Shield in the game. Blue could make absolute bank off of these, but much like with adamant kites, she once again said she wouldn't be making any except for some for Demonic and her friends. In a forum post, she explains why. To be honest, I've seen enough of the two-faced nasty side of too many RuneScape players through free smithing to even consider making them widely available. It's plain as day, 85% of people are just polite to my face to get what they want to make a profit.
Yeah.
She was no longer worried about other smiths catching up. By making adamant items for the general public for free.
Yeah, dude, that was a problem when I played Fly for Fun about a month or so ago, where I noticed that people, so when you log into that game, there's a whole bunch of coupon codes that they give out, and you can get items that people find absolutely super duper valuable by using that coupon code, and it's only usable once per character on the world. So people will just flag you down if you're a new player and be super nice to you and bother you and give you a whole bunch of what looks like really good stuff, but realistically, because the economy's so blown out now, it's basically useless and not worth anything at all. In order for you to give them those XP boosting items or those speed boosting items or whatever that are actually really, really worth something, and they'll pay you crazy amounts, like 200 million coins or whatever, their gold or whatever it's called in there. And yeah, man, I don't know. That's such an annoying trait of people, the like fake kindness to other human beings in order to get something that they want out of them. The best thing that you can do in life is to not want anything out of other people, honestly, to not care if you get the thing from someone or not, so that you can actually be real with people. That's a really good way to go.
She had crushed their plans and severely stunted their leveling. Plus, she could still make money without making rune squares, as other rune items were still in demand. Although, much like with adamant kite shields, she would quickly change her mind. She would post 2 days later, "I may as well trade the odd rune square. I'm damned if I do and damned if I don't, so I'll just do what I damn well feel like."
Good for you.
She was right. If she kept the shields exclusive, players would complain that they couldn't have one. But if she sold the shields to the public, they would just complain that her prices were too high. One day after Blue unlocked rune square shields, her haters would get a big reason to celebrate. On September 23rd, 2001, Jagex would release the Dragon Slayer quest, and along with it, a new shop where you could purchase the rune plate mail body. This would be a big blow to her potential profits. If this item had never been released in this shop and players had to wait for Blue to get 99 smithing to make them, I'm almost certain she would have earned hundreds of millions of GP selling them. Instead, anyone could buy one for just 65,000 coins. Fun fact, the reason that the price of 65,000 was chosen was because the max cash stack at the time was just 65,535 coins. If you picked up any more than that, it would actually start a second stack of coins in your inventory. On September 28th, 2001, Blue would achieve 99 magic. She had been using all of the runes she was given in exchange for her smithing services to level the skill. Not only was she the second person ever to get a 99, it was in one of the most expensive skills in the game. It was a great day for Blue, even if she didn't see the level up message in chat due to how many people were surrounding her asking for a rune square shield. Now, with magic out of the way, she set her sights on crafting, and future items she sold would often need to be paid for in crafting materials. Throughout the course of October and November, she would slowly continue to gain levels, unlocking more and more powerful weapons and armor. Thankfully for her, Jagex wouldn't release any new rune items in shops or from monsters during this time. By the end of November, she had managed to reach level 98 smithing. meaning with a boost, she can now smith every item in the game. Most notably, the powerful Rune two-handed sword, the new best weapon in the game. Players report that the first few swords sold anywhere from 1 to 3 million GP each. But seeing as how much the adamant kite shield sold for earlier,
walk around feeling big after you get that cash stack, dude. You're just walking, just jangling that pocket. Just every time you walk around, dude, that would feel so good.
In this video, I wouldn't be surprised if they sold for even higher. Much like adamant square shields and adamant kite shields, the Rune longsword and Rune two-hander looked exactly the same. So if you wanted to lie to people that you were rich, you just wear a Rune longsword without a shield.
Yeah.
I know some of you watching did this. It's okay though, I know I would have done it too. Although, unlike the shields from before, the two-hander was an incredibly strong upgrade over the longsword. So its high pricing made a lot more sense. Dude. On December 13th, 2001,
you'd be sweating if someone was like, prove to me, go out there and hit max hit with it. And then you're sweating, hoping that the RNG gods somehow magically give you a max hit higher than what you actually can.
Blue Rose would finally reach her goal of 99 smithing. This would make her the first person ever to have 2 99s in the game. Dude. Despite having more wealth than she knew what to do with, she would continue to play RuneScape for the next few years, and even reached rank 2 on the overall high scores in May of 2002.
TKS. We need to look into TKS next. We have to figure it out.
But as more time went on, her influence and name recognition would dramatically fade. Other players would also reach 99 smithing in the following months, such as Musashi22 and even some guy named Zezima. This would cause the Rune two-hander to dramatically fall in price and signal the end of Blue's monopoly and the death of her best moneymaker. The new best gear in the game, Dragon, would have pieces released throughout 2002 and 2003, but none of them could be made through smithing. They were all either obtained from monsters or shops. The only exception to this was the Dragon Square Shield. One half of it was purchasable through the Legends Guild shop, and the other as a rare drop from some monsters. The two halves could then be combined on an anvil, which would only require level 60 smithing. So you want to make an adamant dagger? Yeah, you'll need 70 smithing for that. Best shield in the game? Ah, yeah, man, 60's good. It almost makes the pre-smithing rework level requirements seem reasonable. When RuneScape 2 launched in early 2004, Blue would continue.
2004. So I would have been 9 years old. I was playing that game so much longer than what I realized. This is the thing, is like I'm starting to get to the age now to where if I go back far enough in my brain, it gets so unbelievably fuzzy of what age things actually happen at. It just feels like big segments of my life. Like there's memories where I remember making decisions, and then there's memories where I just feel like I was just floating around as this orb of energy doing things in the world around me and not really thinking about them. Like, I can remember moments of decisions that I made back in the day, but when I started playing RuneScape, I felt like that was something that just happened to me. It wasn't something that I decided on.
Playing the game, but she quit soon after. It's not known exactly why she quit, but it was objectively a very different game from Classic. And she was wealthy enough to do whatever she wanted, maybe even too wealthy. There's no credible sources on what her bank value really was at the time, but the number 3 to 4 billion gets thrown around a lot. Doing some napkin math, assuming she had 4 billion, that's more than enough to buy the best gear in the game, every rare item, and still have, I don't know, 3.5 billion left over. Fast forwarding a decade, she would briefly return in 2015, but under a different display name, and would quit again.
I can't wait till I'm at this point on my new player account. I can't wait until on the unguided account that I get to the point that I have a Dragon Med Helm, a Dragon Longsword, and some Rune Armor, dude. That's going to be absolutely sick. It is kind of sad, right? A game that can be finished, a game where you can achieve max stats, a game where everything can be done by a single player is kind of almost by like my experience and my thoughts, a flawed game in some kind of way, that the game should be ever extending forever in all directions, that's what you want it to be, because that's the way life is. There's never a point in your life to where you'll get so good at something that you can't get better at it anymore, that there will be no new discoveries being made. As long as we continue to exist, and as long as people continue to pour man hours into, technology, into musicianship, into craftsmanship, into entrepreneurship, into education, there will always be new things being discovered, and there will always be new heights to achieve and to strive towards. And they try to make this happen in the games that they make um, by not giving people, by allowing people to continue to get better and better gear and have harder and harder obstacles to overcome. But at the same time, there is always a level cap. There is always some end to your real, true reason to grind for more experience. There's always things that you're not going to be able to make. There are always things that are only going to be dropped by monsters. And I just feel like if we're looking for what a life sim is, the best things in life only come to you through your own actions, and nobody can give them to you. The sense of accomplishment and from that you get from having taken on responsibility and to better yourself and to learn new skills and to get out there and be able to do things that you want to do is something that only you can give yourself. And video games do a really poor job of capturing that feeling in some kind of way. And I think that that's like the next big obstacle. People ask me all the time, I get this so much, what do you think? What do you think the next big MMO thing is going to be? Do you think it's going to be action combat? Do you think it's going to be higher res graphics? Do you think it's going to be a player-based economy only? I think that the next thing that's going to really take over in an MMO genre is limitless expansion in all directions, because the game is somehow generated as you're reaching those points. As you reach 99, the next level becomes 100. As you reach 100, the next level becomes 101. As you reach 101, the next level becomes 102, and so on and so forth, all the way into infinity. So there is no way to catch up. Just the same way that there is no way to catch up to a really, really good guitarist who's been playing since they were 3 years old and have all this natural talent at it. They are going to be better than you unless you figure out some kind of paradigm shifting thing to get yourself there as well. And that's the only thing that I really miss out on in a video game that I can't feel in real life. And that's the reason I think content creation happens around video games, because it sort of ties in video gaming into this sort of feeling of I can keep expanding outwards forever and ever and always. But if they could put that into video gaming, if we could legitimately somehow as people and players be the thing that is creating the content simply by our own successes and creativity in the game, if somehow that can be the thing that we ourselves, by getting better at the game, can create the next best thing that's going to come out in that game, that's when video games will transcend the next point and become a real life simulator all the way down, all the way through and through. RuneScape is a really good approximation of what it feels like, and a lot of MMOs do, of what it feels like to actually live in the real world, but they're missing out on that. There's always a wall. There's always an end to it, no matter what. It might be really hard to get to, but there is an end, and nothing that you can do can create that next step yourself. You have to wait for the developers to put it in. And when we figure that out, when we understand somehow how to make it so that the world is infinite the same way that our universe is infinite, that's when video games go to the next step. That's when MMOs become the next big thing again, and that's when everything changes.
Since then, she's largely vanished from the internet, and nobody from the RuneScape Classic community seems to have any contact with her. So no one is really sure what she's up to these days, and it's even believed that her original account was hacked, so her massive coffers are now gone. But her legacy and impact on this game's history is something that will never be forgotten. Remember that video I mentioned about RuneScape Classic's rune shortage?
Well, this video was great. If you haven't liked the video already from Colonello, you should go and like it. And if you haven't subscribed to Colonello, you should go and subscribe to him. But yeah, guys, it was kind of a long one. This was a really interesting topic, and I think it's something that we like. A lot of people who play RuneScape really don't even think that much about classic RuneScape. Like, oh, but here's 2007. I know everything that's going on, and it's just not that way. Edited by Fart Charlie. That's an insane name, dude. An absolutely insane name. Okay, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Be safe out there. See you later. Bye.